Near the end of World War II, the Allies decided to launch an attack against the Germans in Holland. The intention was to push them back to the Rhine, Germany's last natural defense barrier. The action needed an airborne operation of 35,000 paratroopers. It was a daring and dangerous plan, and this is where it happened, on the battlefront. By late August 1944, the Allied armies have pushed the Germans back through France. In countless small battles, the Germans have been losing men and armor in their retreat. Fighting their way through the lush farming country, the Allied command realized they need to make a major move to break up German forces. For this, one of the most difficult airdrops ever planned is put into operation. Operation Market Garden is a two-stage invasion to secure all the bridges along a narrow corridor extending approximately 80 miles into Holland, from Eindhoven in the south to Arnhem in the north. With Arnhem in Allied hands, the objective is to get around German defences at the Siegfried Line and cross the Rhine. It is a daring plan with strong elements of risk, but if it succeeds, the war could be over within a matter of weeks.
Arnhem was the key to Market Garden. Arnhem was the seventh of 7 essential bridges to pass the British 30th Corps to gain a bridgehead across the Rhine, and also as a springboard to pass 30 Corps up another 35 miles to the Zuider Zee, and also provide the springboard to the major attack into northern Germany. It was to maintain the momentum of the Allied advance that had gone on in late August and early September, when it looked like the German army was on the ropes.
Spearheading this attack will be the crack troops of the Allied Airborne Army. Awaiting them in the Netherlands are 400,000 Germans of the 9th and 10th SS Panzer Divisions.
The German defenders in Arnhem and in the Arnhem area were much stronger than the Allied commanders had anticipated. Just by chance, 2 German SS Panzer divisions, that is armored divisions, had moved into the Arnhem area to rest and refit. Both of these divisions had suffered considerable casualties in previous fighting, but even a small number of armored units like this were a formidable opponent for the lightly equipped paratroops. In addition, there were considerable anti-aircraft guns in the area.
There are also nearby Luftwaffe bases, making an air penetration particularly dangerous. Meanwhile, the Germans build up their units with reinforcements. The defense of their borders is a top priority. Operation Market Garden has been set for September the 17th. The battle plan specifies that the 1st British Airborne Division will take the all-important bridge at Arnhem. The American 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions will be responsible for securing the bridges to the south at Nijmegen and Eindhoven. Once these strategic bridges are taken intact, it is estimated that the British Second Army should reach Arnhem within 2 days. But weather is a major factor.
It was the belief that if this airborne army was not used by the end of September, the type of weather that was in northwest Europe would preclude it from being used on a large scale until spring. Therefore, there's not only the time pressure of having to meet a short schedule, but also to get it in before the weather takes place. The preparations were extremely hectic. The operation, for example, to drop airborne troops into Normandy had been planned for months, and most of the divisions knew what their operation was going to be for a period of about 4 to 6 months. The entire Market Garden operation is put together in a period of less than 7 days. It was actually executed on the 7th day.
Sunday, September the 17th, is clear and sunny, with a forecast for more of the same. At 9:45 a.m., 2,000 British and American aircraft take off from airfields in England.
The key to the short suspense in doing it is the fact that the Germans were strengthening the area, and Field Marshal Montgomery, who was responsible overall for the entire operation, wanted to drop the airborne forces before the Germans strengthened the area and made the operation impossible to conduct. The airmen that supported battle really fell into two packets. For the troop carrier pilots, this was really their meat. The troop carriers had last been used in southern France for an invasion. Before that, they had been in the invasion of Normandy. They had been hauling supplies, and their real purpose and existence is to drop parachute troops. They also realize it's a dangerous operation. The tactical air support guys who both flew escort missions and attacked targets had been doing this since June. For them, it was another operation, I think.
The crossing is made with little interference. For the pilots, the lack of Luftwaffe resistance is a relief.
The average soldier really has two emotions about getting ready to battle. First, he has the anxiety of the fact that this is going to be a dangerous event, and that a certain number of them are certainly not going to come back. The second is that they are anxious to be in the battle, in the sense that their divisions are out of the line where the others are in it. Their officers were also eager to go, but there were some of them, as the operation came up, that realized that this was going to be no tea party. Certainly at the higher level, the senior commanders realized that this was going to be an extremely important operation, and it could be the decisive operation of 1944 following Normandy.
The Germans were initially surprised by the airborne invasion in the Arnhem area. Germans on the ground looked up and saw a steady stream of paratroop transports and gliders as far as they could see. General Kurt Student, the German who had pioneered the use of airborne operations earlier in the war, was astonished by the size and the scope of the invasion and remarked rather wistfully that he wished he'd had those kind of resources to use himself.
For the British up north of the Rhine, they put in their Pathfinders at 1300, 1 o'clock. Their actual drop commences with glider assault by the 1st Air Landing Brigade. It begins at 13:30 and goes until 2 o'clock. And that's followed by a parachute drop of the 1st Para Brigade, which goes in around 2 in the drop zones that have been secured by the glider soldiers.
Almost the entire armada of over 400 gliders successfully lands on Dutch soil. But the Germans are already beginning to mobilize their troops. September the 17th, 1944. The British paratroopers have to land several miles to the west of Arnhem because of heavy German flak concentrations around the city. The 1st Parachute Brigade set off for the road bridge over the Rhine. Other units in the first wave must wait in the landing zones until the second drop has arrived.
It was actually a textbook drop. There was very little opposition both along the route and on the drop zones or landing zones for gliders themselves. Where this would change is once they got off the landing zones or the drop zones and started to move towards their objectives. By dropping away from the objective, they have lost the element of surprise that the Germans in the area have now been notified that there are airborne drops, and they would find that they would have to fight their way to their objectives in almost every case.
The Germans recover quickly from their initial surprise. Reinforcements are rushed in. Orders go out to hold the bridges at all costs, and that further landings can be expected and must be firmly resisted. The invasion intentions are exposed when the Germans capture a complete copy of the Allied battle plan from an Allied troop glider that is shot down.
Field Marshal Walter Model at first refused to believe that the captured Allied battle plan was real. It seemed to him incredible that someone would carry such a valuable document in an airborne operation where it was quite likely to fall into enemy hands.
The British have managed to obtain a foothold at the northern end of the Arnhem Bridge, but soon fresh German reinforcements arrive and it becomes more difficult to secure the southern end. There would be greater resistance from the Germans than anticipated. In the Nijmegen area, the American 82nd Airborne has managed to take their objectives. The town of Grave has been captured, and the Maas River is crossed. At Eindhoven, the American 101st Airborne approaches the town on schedule, but has been stopped by strong German resistance. Units of the British Second Army have crossed the Dutch border and have begun their drive northwards. Rocket-firing Typhoon fighter planes cut a path for them. But all these operations are of no use unless they can link up with Arnhem, now in dire need of reinforcements.
When the parachute battalions came off the drop zone to move towards the bridge, they became embroiled in house-to-house fighting.
The Germans had to recapture Arnhem house to house against skillful British resistance. Eventually, the Germans began to use phosphorus rounds simply to set fire to the buildings and burn their opponents out.
Now, the area itself is very thickly wooded, and the British advance is actually channelized into these ambushes, and there's virtually no other way to go around them.
The next day, in the early afternoon, the second airdrop takes place. Since the Germans have the battle plans, they are well prepared.
By having the plan, and also by seeing where the drop zones were still being maintained from the first day, the Germans were able to zero in exactly on where the follow-on supplies were going to come in the follow-on drops. So it was no mystery to the Germans as to what the plan was. The British would be parachuting from only several hundred feet with machine gun bullets that are being sprayed in an area. The guys that are hanging under these parachutes are helpless. They are helpless to shoot back in most cases, and they are helpless to get down any faster than they can fall.
With heavy German ground opposition, many of the parachute troops are shot as they descend. Trying to avoid gunfire, others land in trees and become hopelessly entangled. The drop is also a disaster for the aircraft.
The transports came in so low, only a few hundred feet off the ground, that even light anti-aircraft weapons were able to engage both the transports and the paratroops as they jumped. In some cases, paratroops were captured as soon as they landed. In other cases, gliders caught fire on the landing zones.
The Germans continue to pick off the paratroopers and the aircraft. Since the Allies have no backup plans, the planes continue to come under heavy fire. The Germans are able to capture a glider filled with British troops and equipment. The prisoners are immediately marched away in defeat. The fighting to the west of Arnhem has now come down to house and garden to garden. Germans are found firing from holding positions in cellars. Concern grows among the beleaguered British units now running out of ammunition. The 1st British Airborne will be wiped out if reinforcements do not arrive soon.
British had attempted to parachute to their troops additional supplies and ammunition, but most of those supplies, in fact, fell into German hands.
The struggle for Arnhem becomes a pitched battle waged in the streets of the town. Neither side is sure where the other is hiding, which makes every street corner a possible trap. With the British grip on the Arnhem Bridge loosening, German tanks are able to push into the area at a swift rate. The British force has been decimated. Their one hope is that they can hold on until the 2nd Army units push up from the south.
Each soldier carried rations for a couple of days and a basic load of ammunition. This was approximately 100 bullets, generally 2 hand grenades. Their resupply was supposed to come by air on the 2nd and 3rd days. For the battalion that made it to the bridge, there was no resupply, because once they were at the bridge, they were encircled and were cut off.
By September the 21st, the bridge at Nijmegen is crossed and British land forces reach the southern edge of the Rhine, opposite Arnhem. But the German panzers launch a massive counterattack. The British are forced back from the bridge and German tanks roll across unopposed.
On the 21st of September, the German armor was pushing into the main British landing zone outside of Arnhem. And it was obvious that it was only a matter of time before the British would have to leave or surrender. At one point, the Germans got in the loudspeaker, speaking in English, addressing the British troops and calling on them to surrender, promising them fair treatment if they would do so. The British response was nonverbal, but it was very obvious. Even though they were extremely short of ammunition at the time, the British almost spontaneously opened fire with everything they had when the announcement ended.
The first serious attempt of the British to end this, really, is in the morning of the 20th, when the second in command of the battalion, because the battalion commander had been badly wounded, agreed to a truce to allow wounded soldiers to be taken out of the burning houses. And the Germans helped them do this.
On the evening of September the 21st, the British general sends an emergency message to Allied headquarters that the battle can go either way. British casualties are heavy and they are low on ammunition. Every effort has been made to link up units of the British Second Army with the battered defenders at Arnhem, but without success. By the 24th, plans for the evacuation of the 1st Airborne are put into effect. The 1st Polish Parachute Brigade has secured a position on the Rhine. They unite with units of the British 43rd Infantry Division and push towards the perimeter outside Arnhem, where they will assist the 1st Airborne in its withdrawal.
The German defeat of Operation Market Garden was a considerable lift to the Germans' morale. After months of retreat and defeat, they had finally been able to inflict a significant defeat on their opponents. Unfortunately for the Germans, this brief psychological lift simply prolonged the agony both for Germany and also for the occupied Low Countries.
second day onward, the Germans were able to swarm in the corridor that led up towards the Arnhem Bridge. And at the desperate attempts to make it to the north were actually slowed down by the fact that the road behind them was cut, that their supplies were cut off, and that in some cases they had to take soldiers from the push northward to actually counterattack either to the east or to the west or to the south. So 30 Corps was actually fighting in 4 separate directions at once. The plan, which had been based on breaking through a thin crust of enemy resistance, when that turned out to be different, it was a completely different battle.
Just over 2,100 men of the 1st Airborne are able to reach the safety of the South Bank. By morning, further evacuation is impossible. German machine guns strafe the area. On September the 26th, panzers move into Arnhem unopposed. The once peaceful city lies in ruins.
There really is no formal surrender. That the surrenders, I think, that took place at the end were of small groups of men, generally who were out of ammunition and run into the Germans, who were kind enough not to shoot them.
Of the 10,000 paratroops involved in the operation, about 1,500 were killed. More than 6,000 paratroops were captured by the Germans. Operation Market Garden is a failure. Too many lives are lost and not enough ground is captured to make this a victory for the Allies. But it is an operation characterized by the exceptional courage and resolution of its men.